So I'm just sitting there on the outskirts of the table, observing what is happening. I see something that no one else sees. But that's the moment. Do I say something or do I keep it to myself? Before I get into this story, I need to tell you guys that this video is sponsored by Western Rise. That's my go-to brand for travel, apparel, and clothing. I love it because it is stylish and it is functional. I don't always look stylish. Okay, when I do, it's probably because I'm wearing Western Rise. And I love it because it's versatile. I can put it through the ringer and it's still fresh. It looks fresh, it stays fresh, it's legit travel, apparel, and it's just, you got to get into it. And the reason I'm telling you about this now is because right now they're having their anniversary sale from now through April 30th. Okay, you need to take advantage of this sale. Stuff is 40% off all across their website, and that is a great deal. Don't miss this opportunity to upgrade your travel apparel. All right, it doesn't matter if you're just going out for a weekend, couple days, or if you're like on a long-term travel adventure where you need some pants that are gonna last you, okay, and stay fresh. I know I've been there. All right. I need some pants that stay fresh. Western Rise is where it's at, okay? Anniversary sale, go to the website, Western Rise, check it out. You might not know this about me, but I have a MFA. Brag, it's not a brag. If you know, the Master of Fine Arts is not that special, but I have one. I got an MFA in writing, okay? I went to the University of Nebraska and I focused on writing, and I had an excellent experience. The way I did it was, it's called low residency. So I had a full-time job and I was working and I was married, but then for like 2 weeks, twice a year, I would go to Nebraska. And we would meet at this lodge. It was in Nebraska City. And Nebraska City is famous for Arbor Day. Now, I did not know that until I got to Nebraska City and I was in the taxi. I was like, what's special about Nebraska City? And he goes, Arbor Day, of course. And I was like, of course. I was just rolling with him, pretending that I knew what that was. Now I do know. It's about trees. It's a tree day. We stayed at this lodge, okay? And the teachers came in and the students came in for 2 weeks, and we had like this intensive study. And then I would be one-on-one with the professor. You got hooked up with a faculty mentor that you worked with through the whole semester. And I had to write pages and send them back and forth. It was a really cool way to learn to be a writer. I was already into writing. You know, I got an undergrad degree in English. The reason I got a degree in English is because I had professors in college who really encouraged me about my writing. You know, it wasn't until then that I thought I could do it at all. And, you know, I wasn't not working as a professional writer, but just like as something that I was interested in. People tell you an English degree is not very useful. And I would counter, useful for what? Finding work? Not very. That's true. It's not very useful for finding work. The books that it makes you read make you more able to engage with the problems of life, okay? Like, that's what reading stories, good stories, does, and learning how to communicate through story and narration. It's actually a great life skill. It might not make you super employable, okay? But useful is a relative term. I would still call it useful. But anyways, I decided to get a master's degree. What am I going to get a master's degree in? Writing. Also, not the best career move, but I wasn't going because I wanted a job. I already had a job. I wanted to become a better writer. And this program did that for sure. My focus was fiction, okay? So I was learning to write fiction. You could focus on poetry, you could focus on creative nonfiction at the time, you could focus on fiction. So my focus was in fiction. I would connect with other fiction writers. We would have workshop time, which was great, you know, where we're like encouraging each other about writing, helping sharpen and hone our skills. And then I would send pages off to a professor, and he or she would say, hey, okay, you need to work on this. So go read these 2 books, see how they do it. Maybe write me a little paper about that, and then try these pages again with that skill. And the residency times were super dope, okay? Because you were getting together with other creative people. And in my line of work, I didn't do that very much. I didn't hang out with artists. But for 2 weeks, twice a year, I was just surrounded by these creative people. And we had meals together, we hung out together. Some of the students were a little bit older. And some of the professors looked young, okay? They dressed young. At least to me, they didn't look like professors that I had seen before. And it was confused. I didn't know who was a student and who was the teacher at first, okay? And so we had these first couple of events for, you know, it's your first residency and you would hang out with the new people. And I didn't know who in the circle was a teacher and who was a student. And the way they talked about stuff, I couldn't tell either. Because, you know, they're, oh, what are you into? Yeah, what are you into? Okay, and I thought I was talking to a student who turned out to be one of my faculty advisors later. Okay, they look like the 2 teachers in the circle could have been students, and they were talking to each other like they knew each other. I thought maybe they were just students a little bit ahead of me. But no, they were professional writers. Okay, so what that speaks to, not just their wardrobe and the general coolness with which they carried themselves, but also their humility, which is not what you always find with creatives and with writers, but that's certainly what I found at Nebraska. It was so great. And I'm getting to the story, but I'm just trying to set it up for you. This was at the residency, at this lodge. I was spending time with all these creative people, and it was great. It was making me become, that's what made me become a writer, you know, is not just that I was writing, but I was surrounded by people who were also writers, and we were telling each other, that's the first time I was called a writer. They were like, oh, what do you write? Nobody ever asked, what do I write? Nobody ever asked me that before, you know, and just the way that we were interacting about it is what made me a writer. That's why I can say, yeah, I'm a writer. I should see if the University of Nebraska wants to sponsor this video. Anyway, so we're at this lodge. The lodge was nice. The rooms were nice. The food was really good. The ambiance was very nature heavy. It was arboristic. That's, I'm sure, a word. But there wasn't that much to do, okay? And so in the evenings, it was like people were milling about, people doing different stuff, and I was kind of just wandering around the lodge, and I found this group of people who were playing poker. Now, I had played poker before, but I didn't know like a lot about what beats what. They were playing for quarters, you know, it wasn't like a big gambling thing. I didn't know who was a student and who was a teacher, but I just decided to like sit down there. They saw me and they were like, hey, Christian, come on over, you know, sit. Oh, okay, do you want to play? I better watch. So it's my first night, and I just sat around the table and I watched them playing poker. And obviously, I learned the rules while they were playing. Now, it turns out this whole group was teachers. I figured out pretty soon. They were all professors. No students were down there, but they had welcomed me and invited me, and they kept saying, you sure you don't want to play? You sure you don't want to play? They didn't just want to take my quarters. They were just cool. And I was like, no, I don't need to play. I'm only going to use first names, okay? Because I don't want to blow up anybody's spot. Some of these are known writers, okay, that I was saying, known is relative, but whatever. So Lee, she's there, she's running the game. Dude named Bill, who's a poet, who I love, he's down there. The guy named Jim, also a poet. Jim had like long hair, and Jim was just like, I don't really know how to play poker either, but I'm just gonna hang out with you guys. And then there was Steve. Steve was real cool, real serious. He was one of the guys in that first meeting where I didn't know if he was a student or a teacher. Steve's a poet, and he had like a broodingness and like a dark, but it was a lot of it was tongue in cheek. He was just had a really wry sense of humor. Very cool guy. Anyway, they're all playing, and I'm listening to their stories, and it's so cool, man. And I just feel like I can't believe I get to be a part of this club, you know? I'm just hanging out. I'm just watching. And like I said, Jim wasn't super great at poker. But he's got quarters for days, you know? So he's spinning quarters and betting and just, yeah, this. So I'm sitting there behind him, and I'm kind of, I don't know, at this point, I was just kind of like watching his hand. I wasn't his partner or anything. I'm just observing. I wonder if they thought it was weird, actually, that I was just sitting there the whole time, not really saying anything and just listening. Like wallflower style. I don't know what they thought, except that they just were super welcoming and didn't seem to mind this dude just watching them. Now, Jim has a really good hand, okay? The pot's going, the pot's getting bigger, it's getting bigger. It's quarters, but still, it's a big pot for the night, okay? And it comes down to Steve, serious poet Steve, and Jim, kind of laid back, wild Jim. Let me tell you about Jim. There was this tree. It was Arbor Day town, right? There was this tree that was out in the field that you could see from the lodge. And it was in the midst of these other trees that were smaller, and this tree was like bigger, but it looked like a dead tree. And Jim was like, I'm gonna go feel that tree's energy and see what I can find. So he went out there and like laid his hands on the tree. Came back and was like, it's freaking dead. I'm watching Jim's hand. Jim has a really good hand. So it comes down to it. Jim calls, Steve lays down his cards, and he's like, I got this. And Jim goes, oh, I only got this. So he misunderstood what he had in his hand, actually. But I was looking right at it. It's one of those moments where I should have stopped to think, should I say something? I am just the outsider, brand new student here with all these people who know and love each other. And yeah, they've invited me in. But am I safe to really interject? But I didn't think that, okay? Because all I did was I saw what was actually happening, and I was like, no, Jim, actually you have this. And I just blurted it out. And he goes, what? Oh, I do have this. And he rearranged a couple of his cards. I have this. People at the table straight up lost it, okay? Because Steve had already grabbed the money. Steve was already like, it's my night. And then everybody at the table was like, oh, like pointing at him, pointing at me, clapping for Jim. Jim just puts his arm around me like, this is my buddy right here. Yes. And they're all laughing, except for Steve. Steve was not laughing. Like I said, he had a wry sense of humor, but in that moment, I do think he was genuinely ticked off. He was like, oh, who is this guy? Where did you come from? All of a sudden, I don't know if you have ever been cussed out by a poet, but it is the best way for that to happen to you, okay? When a poet is doing it to you, it's the greatest thing ever. Because I remember all the things he said, some of them I cannot repeat, but he was just like, oh, really? Oh, all of a sudden, the fiction writer cares about the truth? Oh, you want to say something true now, do you? Get out of here. Go over there, stand in the corner, and just think about being honest. You fact Nazi. I think it took about 24 to 48 hours for Steve to let go of the fact that I had ruined his big hand, but we were fine. I couldn't believe that these people who were professionals, who publish poetry and fiction, and they're known, and they were just like, yeah, this guy's a writer too. You know, they just invited me in. The next night, I got a roll of quarters. I started playing. We would play poker almost every night of the residency, and I became a regular. They just always expected Christian to come too. It was one of the most special things about my residency time were the stories that I got to hear these writers tell. I still remember them so vividly. I mean, they are the best storytellers, and I just got to be with them. And it was like I got to be one of them. Before that, I wouldn't have said that I'm a writer, but these writers called me a writer. They welcomed me as one. They asked me about my writing. We talked about that like it was something that I did, and then it just became true. I had such a good experience in my MFA program. And it wasn't just the practical writing skills that I gained, which I did, and they absolutely had an impact on my capacity to tell stories. It made a huge difference. But it was also these moments, the impact that it had on my identity of being called a writer, being welcomed as a writer, being part of a creative community. And this is something that is so special. And I learned so many ways to swear at someone from that poet. I don't use that as frequently, but it's also in there.